friends, welcome back. Let us continue with our discussion about transaction analysis. In the previous session, I talked about two components of TA, that is ego states in terms of pack model, that is parent, adult and child ego state, and then we discussed about transactions where we have discussed about complementary, crossed and ulterior transactions. In this session, I am going to talk about the other component of TA, that is strokes. It is a unit of recognition that may be positive or negative in any transaction. So, when two people are interacting with each other, to what extent they recognize each other in the transaction, their presence in terms of their physical presence or maybe through their verbal or non-verbal communication, how they tend to recognize or appreciate anybody's presence in that transaction, that is a stroke. So, it can be positive, negative or it can be both. For example, if I say that any employee or any manager who acknowledges his co-worker's performance that you did a great job. So, this is a positive stroke where his performance has been recognized in one of the transaction that is taking between two people, the manager and the supervisor. The other transaction can be that you could have performed better, but somehow you failed this time. So, this is a negative stroke where the performance of an employee has been evaluated, acknowledged in terms of low performance or failure in a transaction. Or there can be another example that in spite of having less experience, you did a good job. So, here both of these strokes are there, positive and negative. Negative, that while not having appropriate experience, still you could perform better. So, both the kind of strokes are there, positive and negative. The negative is not having the experience, highlighting in a transaction and still doing a good job, again a positive stroke. So, this is all about strokes where we tend to recognize the person's presence in a transaction in different manner. So, strokes can be exchanged whenever two persons interact with each other and can be defined as any act implying recognition of another's presence. Stroke may be positive, negative or a combination of both, whereas the negative stroke is considered to complete a transaction because any individual will not only seek for a positive stroke, the individual also seeks for a negative stroke where he tends to get some kind of feedback as well in that transaction. So, this leads to a social equilibrium from their point of view. Why? Because they want to know based on an transaction, that is interaction between two people, that where they were good and where they were bad in their performances. So, this create a sense of equilibrium or balance within an individual, that to what extent his presence has been recognized, to what degree. This is about social equilibrium. So, strokes can be of three types. You did a great job, it is a positive stroke. Where are you? I was looking for you for so long and I am in a big trouble. This is a negative stroke because that person's presence was in terms of absence and this presence was required. Another, that you did a great job in spite of your less work experience in the field. So, this transaction has both negative and positive stroke. So, we can say that stroke is something that where an individual seeks some kind of equilibrium, social equilibrium in the transaction, where he tends to identify his own presence in terms of positive and negative strokes. Strokes imply all types of recognition such as physical, verbal and non-verbal between persons. It can be that maybe two people are interacting with each other and maybe any third person will join that interaction and that third person will be ignored. So, this is also a stroke. This gives an indication that you are not required in this transaction. So, this is a kind of social indication in terms of strokes, that how your presence has been recognized based on the transaction that takes place between three people. This is about strokes. Next comes life positions. This is one of the most sensitive and intriguing component of human personality. This talks about the complexities that an individual comprises of in his behavior and which takes a base on his childhood experiences. Now, these childhood experiences create and establish a psychological position of an individual. Based on those psychological position that has been created since childhood will be operationalized in his life throughout his life. Now, why I am talking about throughout his life, that when a child is born, he has a very small social world. In that social world comprises his parents, his siblings, maybe his grandparents and very few close intimate friends with whom he tends to maintain regular interaction with him in his day to day life. Now, the point is that that kind of interactions that takes place in the child's social world, that has a great influence on his personality, and that influence can be positive or negative. For example, if we say that any child who experiences authoritative parenting practices, then maybe he will have a very different kind of psychological position, maybe he is very rebellious or maybe he is full of anger. On the other hand, if a child has experienced a very compassionate parenting practices where there is some sense of liberty and some sense of responsibility, the child will have a different flair or different psychological position where he has a very different pattern of interacting within his social world or external world. And how this psychological position influences every transaction that takes place in his or life with the other person throughout his life, at least till adulthood. So, Eric Berne has talked about 4 life positions or life scripts that are being created based on childhood experiences. So, in the process of growing up, people make assumptions about their self-worth as well as about the worth of significant people in their environment. As I mentioned, that the social world is so small that the child tends to interact with him to a larger extent in day to day life, and that creates a sense of self-worth for himself, that how the people in his social world perceive him and how he perceives those people who are very important in his social world, that influences his personality or that ego state. So, this assumption about oneself and others is life position. As I mentioned, that if a child has experienced authoritative parenting practices, he will have a very different understanding about his own self or worth, and he has a very different perception and understanding for his parents and the social and external world. So, when the child moves out in the external world, he will also perceive the whole external world based on the way he has been brought up, that is based on his authoritarian parenting practices that the child has experienced. And if the child has experienced liberal and responsible parenting practices, then he or she will also perceive or interact with the external world on the same lines. So, this creates a life position where the person tends to perceive himself on some line, on some script, on some position, and he will perceive the other person based on those situations only. So, Eric Berne has termed these kind of situations as life positions. So, life positions are permanent throughout the life and are described in terms of okayness. Now, if a child has experienced authoritative parenting practices, for them in long run it becomes acceptable. So, he is okay with that and he tends to perceive the whole world on that okayness only, or vice versa. So, what are those 4 life positions which are based in terms of okayness? The first is I am okay, you are okay. I am not okay, you are okay, I am okay, you are not okay, and I am not okay and you are also not okay. So, these are the 4 life positions that are being built up on an individual's experiences of based on transactions which takes place between an individual and the significant others. The significant others means some important significant people in his social world. As I mentioned, parents, grandparents, siblings, or maybe your teachers or your intimate close friends. So, they tend to influence us to a greater extent. So, the first life position, that is I am okay, you are okay. So, it is one of the most healthy life position that anybody can experience right from childhood to adulthood. So, where the individual's personality grows to the optimal and healthiest level, where the child perceive him with high self esteem or worth and also perceives the other individual on the same line. That means, he has perception of high self worth for the other person as well. So, this position is considered the most optimal and healthiest position in life, and the person feels good about himself and feels good about the other person also. So, again I am coming up with the same example, that if any child who has been brought up on based on the parenting practices based on liberty and responsibility, then such kind of psychological position can be created for that child. So, people occupying this position hold belief that all people are innately worthy and valuable, because they have that understanding or perception of the whole world on positive terms, because when they are perceiving themselves positive, they also tend to perceive the other person as worthy and valuable. This position is characterized by an attitude of openness, honesty and trust. This is so obvious that you are building trust on yourself, then you tend to have that immediate spillover effect on the other person to build the same kind of trust on the other person. So, people occupying this position are collaborative and accepting of themselves and others. So, acceptance about the social world is very high, because what a person perceives about himself, he will have the same kind of reflection on the other person, and the person becomes very much open and acceptable. So, it is about I am okay, you are okay, the most healthiest and optimal position that any individual can experience. The other is I am okay, you are not okay. If a child is treated badly or abused, this may result him or her feeling helpless, powerless and angry. As I mentioned, that if a child experiences some traumatic experiences in school, or maybe based on his parenting practices or interpersonal relationships with his family, the child tend to develop a low self-worth for himself. He experiences helplessness, powerlessness, or sometimes develop anger for himself and the other significant people. So, therefore, in this kind of life position, the child may develop a angry position where one feels good about himself, but see others as damaged or continually prove himself that others are not okay. Now, the point is that maybe the flaw is within that child only or that person, but in order to pose him to have a high self-worth, he will try to find fault in the other person. The fact is that the child is not okay, the child is experiencing low self-worth, but he tries to find low self-worth in the other person and making them responsible for the wrong that has happened to him on the external world. So, people in this position project their difficulties onto others, and they may blame and be critical of others. It is about imposing your life situation onto others and posing yourself to be more superior. So, it is about I am okay, you are not okay, but actually in reality the life position is that the child has a very low self-worth. Now, if this kind of life position or psychological position has been created by an individual based on his childhood experiences, this kind of life position is reflected in future interactions or transactions as well. So, transactional games that reinforce this position involve self-styled superior, that is I am okay, who projects anger, disgust or disdain onto a designated inferior or scapegoat, that is you are not okay. So, it is about putting blame on the other person, although the person knows that the fault lies within me, but still because you are trying to pose yourself superior in comparison to the other person, that is how this game starts taking place in interaction between two people. And we have discussed this term earlier also, that whenever we are talking about transaction analysis, it is about the games that takes place. Now, here the game is how the transaction is taking place, and in that transaction, suppose in this situation only, like I am okay and you are not okay, then in such kind of situation the game is that the person who has actually low self-worth is trying to put blame on the other person. He is trying to be more superior, and actually when we talk about psychology, there is no such term that is superiority, it is always inferiority. In order to overcome inferiority, the person tend to engage in self-styled behaviorism, that is superiority. So, superiority is redundant in vocabulary of psychology, whereas inferiority does exist in vocabulary. The other is I am not okay and you are okay. If a child is treated badly or abused and receives messages that decreases his self-worth or esteem, that child moves into the position where the person sees himself as weak partner, especially in relationships, and that others in life are definitely better than themselves. So, here the perception is right that he experiences powerlessness, anger, low self-esteem and weakness, especially in relationships, but at the same time his perception for the other person is very high. He perceives the worth of the other person to be high and valuable. So, this kind of person holds position will unconsciously accept abuse as okay. So, because he has that psychological position nurtured in a way that abuse or disrespect is common in day to day life, the child also develops the same kind of life position, and in long run till adulthood, even at workplaces, the person tends to accept abuse, disrespect or even injustice. People occupying this position may discount their own needs in favor of others and may experience themselves as victims. So, in order to gain more approval, the person who has low self-worth will try to discount his own needs or wishes, he will try to give up, and at the same time will try to give up on the others' wishes, so that there is more acceptance of him in that circle, and experience himself or pose sometimes himself to be a victim or a weak person. Now again, if I am talking about I am not okay and you are okay, then here this is also a coping mechanism, that how any weak person who has a weak psychological position tends to overcome such kind of situations while discounting their own needs on for having more acceptance in any social group. The other is I am not okay and you are not okay. It is a position of hopelessness, futility and frustration. This is the worst position to be in it, as it means that a person believes that he or she is in a state of despair and the rest of the world is as bad. So, here the perception is that perception about one's own self is negative and perception of the external world is also negative. So, this is a state of despair, hopelessness, where the person cannot make any effort to improve his self-worth, and at the same time he also perceives the whole world, external world on the same line. So, this is the psychological stage or position of an individual where he experiences poor interpersonal relationships at work or non-work domains. He has poor decision making skills where he lacks that ability to or competence to take the right decision and impose accordingly. So, consequently this may lead in self-destructive or violent behavior, because when the perception about the external world is also wrong, so there is no barrier left from where he can tend to have some feedback about his own behavior, because the perception is also wrong for the external world. So, these are the 4 life positions: I am okay, you are okay, I am not okay, you are okay, I am okay, you are not okay, and I am not okay, you are not okay. So, these are the 4 life positions that defines an individual's personality and how an individual operationalize these life positions in day-to-day life till his adulthood, and how the ego states are also being regulated based on his life positions, right. So, what are the benefits of transactional analysis? It provides a better understanding of how people relate to each other so that they may develop improved communication and interpersonal relationships. It provides fresh insights into the psychological makeup of the individual concerned, as psychological makeup means here the life positions or psychological positions which are being created by an individual's situations. It fosters group activities such as brainstorming and conflict resolution wherever your position is, be it I am okay, you are not okay, or I am not okay and you are okay. When such kind of life positions are experienced by an individual, the person seeks for some kind of feedback, some kind of brainstorming in order to resolve those kind of mental conflicts that an individual experiences in day-to-day life. And TA helps in categorizing individuals' patterns of behavior, feelings and ways of thinking, which can be functional, that is beneficial or positive, or dysfunctional, that or counterproductive, that is negative. So, based on these life positions, we can easily identify that which life position will promote counterproductive behaviors or productive behaviors. If we talk about counterproductive behaviors, the 4th state, I am not okay and you are not okay, this leads to counterproductive behaviors. Even the second situation, I am okay, you are not okay, then also the person is trying to promote unproductive behaviors because the person is putting blame. So, there starts some blame game or gameful transactions which can spoil the script of the transaction, right. So, this is about benefits of transaction analysis. Most important significance of this technique is that how people tend to implement such kind of strategies even at workplaces in order to make employees more accommodating, and at the same time leads to more effectiveness and efficiency. Furthermore, TA concentrates the content of people's interactions and helps in solving emotional problems. Now, here the content means about the ego states with which the person is interacting. So, it is very easy to understand that whether the other person's transactions will lead to conflict, that means the person is interacting with his child ego state. So, there the person can tap on the ego states and then try to regulate the transaction. That TA considers how individuals interact with one another and how the ego states affect each set of transactions. Unproductive or counterproductive transactions were considered to be the signs of ego state problems. Analyzing these transactions would enable the person to get better. Ultimately, the objective is to enhance interpersonal transactions, communications and relationship. And TA offers the study of deviance, distress or dysfunctional patterns of behavior, because this highlights the individual psyche based on the life positions, based on the ego states. If any individual's life position is negative, definitely it promotes, it encourages deviant behaviors, and how the person can be pulled back in order to root him or direct him to positive deviance. Distress and dysfunction, it is about ego states, that how under stressful situations also any individual can work from his or operate from his weaker life position or maybe child ego state. So, these kind of interactions actually makes organizations function in terms of improved relationships, improved functionality and ultimately effectiveness and efficiency. So, we are through with this unit also. We will start with the 12th module in the next slide. Thank you so much.